So I'm delighted to welcome for our second keynote session, Kevin Cunnington, who is now an expert advisor for Global Government Forum, but many of you probably will know Kevin because previously he was the Director General for Government Digital Service in the United Kingdom. So a big round of applause, please, for Kevin. Just to get the sound going.
Normally make that noise when I sit down.
I said, so Kevin, obviously he will tell us a bit about his former kind of career and what got you here, but Kevin is advising Global Government Forum at the moment. So I said I'd take this opportunity to just give you a little light into areas where we can then help to provide thought leadership and training for civil servants as well. So please do check out all of the things that we do. But we're so delighted that Kevin now has joined our team and has been doing some of that research and will tell us a bit today in particular about a significant report that he was a key part of looking at digital leaders and the challenges facing digital leaders around the world. So do you just want to tell us why we're so pleased to have you, why you're the perfect person to be doing this, and also maybe some of the highlights from that report?
Yep. So I've come with slides, knowing what the questions might be. That's me. That is actually me. That's my UK government profile. I realise you can't read it terribly well at the back, but it ostensibly says I ran GDS for 3 years, which was a real privilege. I was UK's digital envoy and got to do this all the time under the UK's government sponsorship for 2 years. And I've been doing this with GGF for a couple of years. So I'm not unique, but I am Lucky Kevin. This is what we've been up to. So the graph, or the world graph on the left, shows all the countries we've spoken to over the last year. And on the right, we've laid out exactly what we've been up to. So we started just over a year ago. We had virtual workshops in those days with, well, you can read Scotland, Israel, Azerbaijan, a whole raft of leading nations, really, in the UN benchmarking. And in January of that year, we published all those findings. And I'll talk in detail on the next slide about what those are. We've had a whole set of follow-ups from all the issues the leading countries identified, starting with talking to the CEOs of the civil service in Singapore and asking them what they're going to do about some of the problems they're creating for us, through to having follow-up workshops on vision and planning, capability, digital identity, all of which form big topics in today's agenda, as well as tomorrow's CDIO Summit. The most recent workshop we had was real. It was in Tallinn in Estonia, where we spoke to the CFOs around the issues we're finding in funding and procurement. And then tomorrow is the big follow-up, where we talk to all the CDIOs across the world again here in Ottawa. About 40 people are attending, and our commitment is to republish the report in January next year. In brief, he says, 7 findings in brief. It normally takes me about 40 minutes if I hurry to go through them, and I'm going to do this in about 3. However, they are all online, so you can look it up. And if you're here tonight for the CDI Summit, I will be presenting them in detail. And again, tomorrow, this is exactly the agenda for what we're talking about. So briefly, vision and planning. Visions are largely irrelevant. Most of our visions are the same. We all talk about life events, digital identity, joined-up services, better tools for civil servants. And the actual differentiator is in the planning and implementation. It's the authority you have and the means you have for implementing the vision that turns out to be more important than the vision. Citizen digital identity is very polarizing. There are 197 countries in the world. 11 have digital identity at scale. 186 of us do not. If you have it, you can transform. If you don't, you can't, because you can't join up the data that we hold about people in different silos. So digital identity is probably the key technology topic within digital today. Funding capital investment, let me characterize this as, we gave you a lot of money 5 years ago, Kevin. We'd like to save all the money for climate change right now. It doesn't work like that. If you don't continue investing, you don't resolve the legacy issues that you've got. Funding and procurement, treasuries around the world still see digital transformation as similar to building a bridge or a railway. They think you have a 5-year plan and you stick to it. What they haven't recognized is that digital transformation is about changing citizen behavior. And that citizen behavior is unpredictable and in and of itself changes over time. So you can't stick rigidly to your plan. You have to have some flexibility. Procurement, this was interesting. I didn't expect this. Procurement is still a big problem for a lot of countries who are forced into doing requirements writing and the old style RFPs, request for proposals, and assessments. And at least in the UK, we've managed to successfully move away from that. The one bit of good news, capability at the junior and middle levels, which was a real issue for us all 10 years ago, is largely resolved in the top 10 countries. It's not true of pretty much everybody else, but it is resolved in the top 10. So at least we know how to do that. And in the next slides, I'll talk about how to do that. Lots of countries around the world, like the UK, have constrained pay for senior leaders. Let me characterize this. We can't pay you more than the Prime Minister, Kevin. Really? I used to be paid a lot more than the Prime Minister. And it's a real issue because it not only constrains the people you can recruit at the very top, but also the people you can recruit who work for you. And it's the greatest false economy in government. Paying people too little to do £100 million jobs is just the wrong economy, honestly. And then finally, good news, the CEOs agree with this at the conference. We still have a real issue right at the top with ministers and very senior civil servant, perm-sec, CEO, deputy minister types, not really understanding digital well enough, not feeling confident having the skill sets to help us drive transformation. And that's what we've been up to.
Thanks, Kevin. So really interesting, and I think what you'll find today, a lot of those findings will be reflected in the panel sessions that we have. You'll get an opportunity to explore some of those themes. If anyone has the solution to recruitment, retention and paying people well in the public sector, that would be great if we could solve that today. But Kevin, just moving on in terms of this research from this report, but just your experiences of working in the UK public sector and talking to others, what would you advise people in terms of what are the common mistakes that people make and what would you be advising people not to do, but also to start doing?
Yeah, so in hindsight, and I say this is absolutely in hindsight because none of us got this right, these are, I've been very diplomatic and said 3 necessary actions to start. These are all no-brainers. So the first thing you need to do, which you guys have done, is get your national website up. But there are some nuances here. Do it early. When the UK did it, we did it early, right back in 2013, but we still had 1,900 sites to consolidate into our national site and make them all look and feel the same. And that's really important, that the whole of the service looks the same. Our UK website is now used by 1 in 3 people every week. It's 500,000 pages to give you some sense of the scale of these things. But number 1, get your website up. And it sounds obvious if you've got it, but I've talked to a lot of governments whose national site's on Facebook. And that really doesn't feel like the right answer to the problem. 2, I've banged on about citizen digital identity. I'll bang on a bit more about it. It's hugely polarizing. You need to get it right. Only 11 out of 197 countries, to my knowledge, have. If you're a country like Canada and the UK, where you don't have digital citizen identity in the first place, it turns out to be incredibly hard to get it right. But it is vital, and on the next slide, I'll explain what goes wrong when you don't. And then thirdly, you need to train all your people. So let me give you a very concrete example. When the UK started in 2013, we committed ourselves to developing 25 exemplars, which we did over a 3-year period from 2013 to 2016. In parallel, we built huge academies to retrain civil servants, and we retrained 5,000 civil servants in the course of building those 25 services. 25 services over the first 3 years, 800 services over the next 3. And one of the common conversations I keep having with emerging countries is they do the first 25 and then they say, how do I do more than 25 now? And the answer is you've got to scale your training in parallel with your first implementations, that when you come out of it, you've got thousands more people who have got the skills ready to help you. So that's part 1. Little bit more about academies. Do them from the center, like you are in Canada. So Canada took the UK content and put it online. It's now the Canadian Digital Academy. Do it from the center and make it free. What we're experiencing in the UK is probably the most advanced digital nation economy, is it's now moving out to the private sector. And in my mind, we'll talk about this a little bit later, that is a very good thing, because they've got more flexibility and they can travel internationally to teach some of the courses that require a lot of investment. So create it early, and then at some point move it out into the private sector. Almost everybody, including me and us, have got this wrong. Everybody starts their digital transformation in government with building some applications. And there's some usual culprits: births, marriages, deaths, driving licenses, passports. Let me just tell you how it goes wrong. So we create a citizen service for driving licenses, and a person applies for a driving license in their name with their date of birth and their address. Subsequent to that, they get married, and that might change their name, and it might well change their address. Subsequent to that, they apply for a passport in their new name with their new address. And then at some point, we try and reconcile the passport holder with the driving license. The people are smiling, so you've obviously got it. You can see what goes wrong. If you can't uniquely identify people, then you end up with silos of data about people that are terribly hard to reconcile. So it's really important you get digital identity or some form of data model that underpins what you're doing before you start building lots of applications. And if you're in a situation like the UK, with rather a lot of applications nowadays, and no scaled system identity, you've created an enormous problem for yourself that will probably take a decade to unwind going forward. So one, everybody's done it, but try not to start by building, try to start by getting digital identity and your data model right. Two, almost nobody did this. Assess your digital capability. So what do I mean? How many technologists, how many digital data and technologists are there in Canada? How many data scientists do you have in Canada? Anybody know? It's common across the world. Nobody knows, I think, apart from the UK. We've got 20,000 people in digital data and tech. They're organized into job families. There are actually 37 discrete roles that you'll recognize, from user researcher through to delivery manager through to product manager. There are multiple levels of competency, normally 3 or 4, ranging from junior, middle, expert. And for each of those competencies, there are normally 3 levels of attainment. You're not quite there. You're definitely operating the way you think you ought to, and you're exceeding and ready for promotion. And all that framework ties to pay, so we know what to pay people, and all that framework ties to new training, so that we can enable people to take the next career step. And if you haven't got that, get it done as soon as you can, because only when you understand your capability will you understand what sort of plan you can implement. The next thing that most of us didn't do was estimate the number of applications you'll need to develop. So let me make this a quiz, and let me lay down the gauntlet, because Iceland 2 weeks ago got this exactly right. So come on, Canada, here we go. In 2013, the UK estimated there were 650 central government applications we needed to build. This is before we started building. 650. 10 years later, so central government for us is things like education, tax, unemployment, like it is for you guys, but it does not include the NHS, which is a big bit of the UK. It does not include local and municipal services, so this is just central government. 9 years later, how many applications do you think we've implemented in the UK? Let me give you 3 choices. Number 1, 500 or less, we're still working on it. Number 2, exactly 650. Number 3, 7,672. More than 10 times our original estimate. So who's on option 1, less than 500? Who's on option 2, exactly 650? Oh, somebody put the hand up.
1 hand, 2 hands, 3 hands for that.
We've got 3 hands for less than 500. 650, anybody? Going, gone. 7,672, anyone? Yeah, surprisingly, there it is, at the top of the page, 7,672. So if I were to ask you how many you've done today, you probably wouldn't know. And if somebody had told me it was 7,000 odd in 2013, I'd have been terrified, candidly. But imagine you're a smaller country. So the UK did that with 20,000 digital data and technology internal staff, plus a technology industry that's 7% of GDP. Let's imagine you're not a country of that size, and you look at that number and you think, well, all Western democracies are roughly as complicated as each other. We all license pubs, and we all provide unemployment. So it's probably the case that we've all got similar numbers. That's quite a daunting prospect, really. So let me do the last point, then I'm off, and then I've got the last slide. So none of us did it like this, but you think about it, if none of you have assessed your capability or figured out how much you've got to do, it's really not much of a plan, is it? There can't be many transformation plans we've all started where we had no idea how big it was, nor how many people we've got to do it. So if you've not done this, do it, because it gives you a real kind of sense check of whether it's even achievable.
Thanks, Kevin. I'm just looking at the clock. I was hoping we could get in a couple of questions, but I think what we'll do is you're back on stage later.
Yeah.
So there'll be an opportunity to put questions to Kevin then, and also Kevin will be around all day, so you can definitely grab him out in the lobby as well. But just before we go, in terms of next steps then on this research and the report, what are the next steps, and can people get involved in that in some way?
Yeah, definitely. So in 3 minutes, according to the clock, one is GGF, as Siobhan's alluded to and I've alluded to, is developing courses. One we're currently piloting is for permanent secretaries around the world, because we do recognise, well, they're special, aren't they, for the permanent secretaries who are here. 2 is a whole raft of you will be attending the summit tomorrow. That 7 issues we identified really forms the backbone of the discussion. It's good to whinge about it, it's quite cathartic, but what we're going to do to solve it. 3 is I'd like some help if countries are prepared to volunteer. 7,672, is that really the right number? Discuss. But I wouldn't mind other governments helping me out, if you like, on a department-by-department basis. So if I gave you the list of services we provide for unemployed people, is that comparable to what you do? Recognising we all have different constitutions, so it'll be a little bit different, but do we understand the right order of magnitude? If we can do that, I would love to publish a taxonomy of the kind of services by function that we all need across government to help countries that are way back on this journey really understand what they might want to prioritise, where they might start, what things they might have to, regrettably, keep as non-digital services. And then finally, I have a personal view, when I look at places like North Africa and the Caribbean, that there's a lot of similarities on a regional basis between where people are, as a maturity index. And I'd like to host some regional conferences to give people who are in the same boat, really, a chance to discuss those issues, not with the top 10 who have solved some of those issues, but with themselves very specifically, and also recognising the 7,000 odd challenge, see whether people can help each other out. So that's it. I'm sorry I didn't need time for questions.
No problem. Thank you so much, Kevin. We'll all be following your progress around the globe very closely as you kind of share all this expertise. But as I said, those issues, you mentioned digital ID, for example. There's a session, obviously, on digital IDs later, but on procurement, all those other issues. So we will be picking all of those up later. Thank you so much for now, and we'll be hearing from you later on. Thank you very much, Kevin.